Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
It was a Thursday evening when the message came through. Short, casual, almost flippant, like someone trying not to sound guilty even as they twisted the knife in with a smile. My brother Luke had never been good at directness unless it benefited him, and this time was no different. Hey, just a heads up, it began. Might be better if you skip Christmas this year. You know, for the vibe. That was it. No follow-up. No explanation. Just that. Like I was an old sweater that didn't match the family photo aesthetic anymore. Too frayed. Too out of season. For the vibe. That phrase stuck to the roof of my mouth like a sour taste I couldn't spit out. I read it once, twice, 3 times, thinking maybe I was misreading the tone, maybe it wasn't as cold as it felt. But each time I read it again, the same chill ran down my spine. Luke didn't even bother to call. He didn't say it in person the last time we all had dinner at Mom's, where he made another one of his casual jabs about how I never really got into the Christmas spirit, which, in our family, was code for you didn't bake cookies or wear red. Or plaster on that thin plastic smile. That had been his thing since college, smooth over everything with a joke, hide cruelty and charm. And I used to let it slide because I thought maybe he was just stressed or insecure or trying too hard to impress Dad, even now that Dad's been gone 10 years. But this was different. I didn't respond right away. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, staring at those words like they were glowing hot. For the vibe. What vibe? The vibe where I sit quietly at the end of the table while Luke holds court about real estate or coaching Little League. The vibe where I bring a thoughtful gift, and his kids barely mumble thank you, and he takes the credit for something I paid for. I turned off my phone and let the silence settle in like dust. 2 hours passed before I replied, and when I did, it was just one word, okay. No punctuation. No sarcasm. Just agreement. And that right there was the most dangerous thing I've ever texted. Because when someone who's always been the quiet one finally stops explaining themselves, it means something has shifted. Something's been building, and now it's no longer being held back. You on the vibe, Luke? You got it. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of red wine, the good one I usually save for when company comes over, which, to be honest, doesn't happen much anymore, and I sat down at my laptop. The room was dim except for the glow of the screen, and the silence felt loaded, like the seconds before a thunderstorm breaks. My fingers moved automatically. I typed in the school's name, Lancaster College Prep, and logged into the parent portal I wasn't supposed to have. Because officially, I'm not their parent. Not even a guardian. Just Aunt Melissa, the one who never had kids, never got married, the career woman they all talk about in that patronizing tone like it's a polite diagnosis. But what they never talk about, what they don't know, is that I've been paying for Luke's kids' tuition for the last 5 years. Every single semester. Every single bill. He came to me one night, years ago, ashamed and cornered after his investment tanked and he couldn't make the payments. It was supposed to be a temporary thing. He said he'd pay me back. Just a semester, Mel. 2 at most. But then his business restructured and his mortgage refinanced, and somehow, here we were, 5 years later and nearly $200,000 deep, and I was still the one footing the bill so his kids could attend their fancy, polished school and Luke could keep pretending he had it all together. No one ever asked how I could afford it. No one ever noticed I stopped going on vacations or cut back my hours to manage 2 side consultancies. That I lived in the same modest condo I bought 15 years ago while Luke bought a boat. That I'd been chipping away at my retirement to cover their tuition while he leased a new Lexus. Because I didn't tell anyone. I didn't make a show. That's not how I operate. I just did it. Quietly. Consistently. And I convinced myself it was the right thing, that helping my nephews was worth it, that someday it would all even out. But this year I'm ruining the vibe. I opened the financial dashboard, where I could see the upcoming spring tuition charge, due in less than 2 weeks. 11 grand per kid. 22 grand total. scheduled for automatic payment on December 21st, as it had been for years. One click, and I could stop it. Just one. But I sat there, staring at the screen, my index finger hovering over the button like I was holding a detonator. I remembered the birthday last year when I bought Ethan a new laptop because Luke had forgotten to, and Luke made some comment about how Aunt Mel's trying to raise the bar for all of us. Everyone laughed. But he wasn't joking. He was mocking. And I felt like a clown, sitting there with a receipt in my purse for $1,200 I couldn't really afford. They had no idea. That's the thing, isn't it? The people who rely on your silence the most are usually the ones who deserve your loudest rejection. But we don't always get loud. Sometimes we just stop playing. We leave the stage. We take our ball and go home. And so, after a long sip of wine and one more glance at the screen, I moved the cursor. Hovered over the bright red words, "Cancel auto pay." The system asked me if I was sure. As if that question still mattered. I clicked it. Action confirmed. The screen refreshed. The upcoming payment disappeared. The silence grew even deeper, but now it felt different, not empty, not cold, just clean. Like a window finally opened in a stale room. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 5 years. Merry Christmas, Luke. It didn't start with a promise or even a plan, but with one of those late-night calls you just know will rearrange your whole life, even before you pick up. I remember the way my phone lit up that October evening 5 years ago, around 10:30, when I was brushing my teeth and getting ready for bed like any other Tuesday. It was Luke. I almost didn't answer because I was already tired and in no mood for one of his venting sessions about how unfair life had been to him lately. But something about that third ring tugged at me, maybe habit, maybe guilt, maybe that old, worn-out instinct to always be the fixer, even when I swore I wouldn't. He started with a joke, of course. "Hey, remember that time in college when I ate nothing but ramen for 2 weeks? Might be headed there again." I laughed, but something was off in his voice, thinner than usual, brittle at the edges. Then he got quiet, cleared his throat, and said he'd been laid off. "They said it was restructuring, but I know it's because I wouldn't kiss the right ass," he muttered, bitter and raw, the charm suddenly gone. He didn't ask me for anything right away. He danced around it, the way Luke always did when he needed something he couldn't admit needing. But eventually it came out. Tuition for the boys. Ethan and Caleb were in their first year at Lancaster Prep, and it wasn't cheap, not by a long shot. They'd gotten in on academic merit, but still needed partial tuition, and with Luke's severance barely covering the mortgage, they were facing withdrawal notices by Christmas. "It's just for this semester, Mel," he said, and I remember the way he emphasized the word just, like that somehow made it more reasonable. Just one payment to keep them in school. I'll have a new job by spring, I swear. You know me. And unfortunately, I did know him. I knew he was capable of charm and strategy and spinning a room with a single sentence, but I also knew that when he got scared, when things fell apart, he looked for someone steady to lean on, and I had always been steady. The dependable one. The boring one. The one who never took a vacation without budgeting it down to the penny, who never bounced a check, who still drove the same Honda Civic she bought new in 2007. I hesitated, but I said yes. Because I loved those boys. Because I remembered how proud they were to get into Lancaster. Because I thought, God help me, that Luke meant it when he said it would be just this once. By the way, I think it was around year number 4, or maybe year number 3. Wait, there are 5 semesters in a year, right? Anyway, the payments never stopped. Luke got a new job a few months later, but he said the pay wasn't enough to handle everything. "The raise is coming soon. Just ride it with me for a little longer," he said. Then the car broke down. Then they had to replace the roof. Then, somehow, it became a permanent arrangement that no one discussed. I kept getting the invoices from Lancaster Prep. I kept paying them like clockwork, setting up autopay so I wouldn't have to feel the punch of it every time. I adjusted my lifestyle, cut back on meals out, stopped contributing to my retirement fund, turned down promotions that came with travel I couldn't afford to take. Every semester, the bill would hit my inbox, $11,215. Multiplied by 2, of course. Over the years, it stacked up to almost $200,000, but not once did Luke mention it at Thanksgiving dinners. Not once did he raise a toast to the aunt quietly investing her future so his sons could stay enrolled in a school they thought he was paying for. I kept the receipts, not because I wanted recognition, but because I wanted to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that it was real, that I had done something. But no one saw them. No one asked. The boys sent me sweet little cards sometimes. Thanks for the cool socks. Hope you're doing well, Aunt Melissa. But they had no idea who was keeping them from being pulled out of school mid-year. I remember Caleb once thanked me for the Christmas sweater I gave him and told me he hoped he could be as generous as Dad one day. That one stuck like a fishhook in my throat. Luke loved the credit. He loved the look of being the provider, the devoted father, the suburban rock. He never let them see the strain behind the curtain because I was holding the curtain up. Every Christmas, every family barbecue, I watched him play the role I was subsidizing, and I told myself it didn't matter because it was for the kids. And yet, when he texted me, "Don't come, you'll ruin the vibe," it was like watching the play end and realizing you weren't even listed in the program. So I went back to the laptop that night, pulled up the receipts again. All of them. 5 years worth. Every semester labeled and categorized. And, for the first time, I printed them out. Page after page. I laid them on the floor like puzzle pieces, a full visual of the sacrifices that had kept that illusion intact. It looked like a museum of denial. And in that moment, something in me turned off. Not out of spite, not even anger, but simple finality. This wasn't bitterness. This was closure. I canceled the payments. I didn't warn him. I didn't offer an explanation. Because explanations, like money, have a shelf life. And mine had expired. Let the vibe handle the tuition now. It took exactly 6 days for the first crack to show, and when it did, it wasn't even through Luke directly, which almost made it sweeter in the most twisted, poetic kind of way. I was at the grocery store when I saw Andrea's name flash across my phone screen, and for a second I considered letting it ring out because I knew if she was calling, it probably wasn't just to chat about coffee beans or her dog's new sweater. Andrea never called unless there was family gossip to unload or a mild emergency that needed a sounding board, and knowing our family, both options were equally exhausting. But I answered anyway, partly out of boredom, partly out of curiosity, and mostly because I already had a strange sense of what was coming. She didn't even say hello properly before diving in, her voice already riding high on a wave of secondhand stress. "Hey, do you know what's going on with Luke?" I paused for a beat too long before replying, probably just enough for her to register that I knew something, even if I hadn't said it yet. "Why do you ask?" I said, casually scanning a shelf of overpriced olive oil I had no intention of buying. She let out this little huff, not quite a laugh, not quite frustration, more like someone trying to blow the confusion out of their system. "I just talked to his wife," she said. "Apparently the school called. Something about unpaid tuition? They're threatening to suspend the boys if the balance isn't covered by the end of next week." I felt my stomach tighten, not out of guilt, but more like the way your body tenses just before a wave hits. Andrea continued rambling, clearly trying to make sense of it all. She said they were blindsided, like they thought it was already paid. And now Luke's in panic mode, calling everyone he knows. He even called Uncle Jerry, which, never happens unless Luke is desperate. I made a small noise of acknowledgement, something between a grunt and a hum, while placing a random item into my cart just to keep my hands busy. Andrea went on to explain how Luke had reached out to nearly every branch of the family tree in the last 48 hours, making calls, sending vague texts about a financial hiccup, even hinting at a GoFundMe, although he hadn't pulled the trigger on that yet. She laughed nervously when she said that, like she couldn't believe it had come to that point, and I just nodded silently even though she couldn't see me. Then she dropped the detail that really hit me. Luke had even asked our 70-year-old mother if she could co-sign a personal loan. That one sat in my chest like wet cement. He would rather ask her, a woman on a fixed income with a fading memory and a bum knee, than send a single text to me. I should have been angry. I should have been insulted, even outraged. But what I felt was something colder and much quieter than that, a sense of finality, like a locked door closing behind me. It was almost impressive, really. The lengths people will go to in order to protect their pride, even when it's clear to everyone around them that the house is on fire and the smoke is rising. I stayed quiet on the phone, offering Andrea the kind of vague, non-committal responses that wouldn't ping as suspicious, but also didn't invite further questions. That's strange, I said at one point. Didn't know they were behind on anything. It felt surreal, playing dumb about a situation I had crafted with surgical precision, but necessary nonetheless. Andrea didn't seem suspicious. She was too caught up in the drama to imagine I had anything to do with it. She just kept venting, and I kept nodding, and eventually we hung up, both pretending like it was just another bizarre family hiccup, soon to be forgotten. When I got back to my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the couch, staring out the window without really seeing anything. My laptop sat on the coffee table, screen dark, but pulsing gently with standby light, like it too was waiting for the next move. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew the payment was gone, the portal locked him out, the bills returned to sender. There was nothing left for me to do except wait and see how far Luke was willing to spiral before breaking the silence. 2 more days passed with nothing. No call. No text. Not a single attempt to reach out, which was almost laughable at this point. I thought maybe he was holding out on pride, or maybe he still didn't realize I was the one behind the curtain. Maybe he believed the school had made a clerical error. Maybe he was telling himself it was a system glitch. But deep down, he had to know. And the fact that he was still choosing to go around me, to dial every number in the Rolodex except mine, told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man he really was. Then, on the evening of the 9th day, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification, no missed call, just a message left quietly, like someone trying to slip an apology under the door without being seen. I opened it, and there it was, Luke's wife. Her voice was tight and trembling, trying hard to sound composed, but cracking at the edges like old porcelain. Hi, Melissa. I'm sorry to bother you, and I know this might be out of line, but we're kind of in a situation, and I just thought, maybe, if you have a second, could you call me back? I don't know what else to do. She was crying by the end of the message, not sobbing, but that low, quiet kind of cry you do when you're trying not to fall apart. The sound of someone who's just realized the cavalry isn't coming. I didn't call back. Not yet. I sat there in the stillness of my living room, letting the weight of that voicemail settle in my chest like a stone dropped in still water. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel satisfied. What I really felt, was that this was just the beginning. I sat on the edge of the bed that morning, my phone gripped in my hand like it had something hot trapped inside, that quiet dread humming just beneath the surface, the kind of emotional hangover you can't drink off or sleep away. I hadn't listened to the voicemail again since the night it came and hadn't needed to, but for some reason, that morning, I played it back. Maybe I wanted to hear if I'd missed something in her voice the first time. Maybe I wanted to punish myself by peeling back the scab. Either way, the words hit just as hard the second time. Melissa, I don't know what happened. You were always so generous. Please, help us. Just this one last time. The pause in her voice before she said generous told me everything I needed to know. She had no idea why the money stopped, no idea it had come from me at all, just that something had broken in the background. And now the whole performance was collapsing under the weight of silence. I sat there staring at the wall for a long while after it ended, letting her words echo around the room like smoke in a locked closet. I thought about replying. I really did. There was a part of me, still clinging to the idea that being the bigger person meant showing up even when it hurt, that considered picking up the phone, calling her back, and offering a soft, measured response, something polite, something distant, something that let her know I heard her, but wouldn't be helping this time. But the truth is, I didn't want to do that. Not because I was angry, not anymore, but because I was finally, gloriously tired of cleaning up messes I didn't make. So I deleted the message. Not out of malice. Not to be cruel. I just didn't want it sitting there, festering in my inbox, waiting to be dealt with like an emotional utility bill. I erased it, and with it, I felt something lift. Not guilt, not grief, just the weight of pretending I was still okay with how everything had played out. A few days later, Andrea texted and asked if I wanted to grab coffee, and for once, I said yes without hesitation. Maybe I needed to be around someone who wasn't asking for anything. Or maybe I needed a witness. We met at that little corner place near the old library, the one with the sticky tabletops and the aggressive indie folk playlist that never seemed to change. She arrived late, flustered and half apologizing, wearing a coat that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since last winter. She ordered a double-shot something and sat down with a sigh, immediately launching into an update on Luke. "It's a disaster," she said, stirring her coffee like it owed her an explanation. "He's like melting down. Apparently, the school gave them one more week to settle the balance, and now he's scrambling to pull it together. He even tried to sell that ridiculous espresso machine he bought last year. You know, the one with the Italian name nobody can pronounce." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt like the only possible response to a situation this absurd. Andrea looked at me, eyebrows raised, waiting for me to offer some kind of shocked reaction or platitude. Instead, I sipped my coffee, looked her straight in the eye, and said, almost too casually, "Well, he might have more luck if he hadn't burned the only bridge paying those bills." She blinked. "What do you mean?" And that's when it happened, the moment the truth slipped out, unplanned, raw and unwrapped, like a knife tumbling from a drawer. I didn't even think about it. It just happened. "I was the one paying the tuition," I said, calmly, as if I were discussing the weather or the cost of gas. Andrea's mouth fell open in a way that almost made me laugh again. She looked around, like someone had just thrown a pie across the room, then back at me, eyes wide and brimming with disbelief. Wait. Are you saying you were paying for their school this whole time?" I nodded once. Not smug, not proud, just confirming. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling so hard it fogged the cold window behind her. Holy shit. There it was. The words I had waited 5 years to hear. Not the profanity, the shock. The moment someone else finally understood the scale of what I had been doing in the shadows, the sacrifices made invisible because I never put a bow on them or turned them into family anecdotes. I didn't need applause. I just wanted someone to know. Andrea sat there for a few more seconds, then leaned forward like she was about to ask a question, but couldn't quite form the words. I saved her the trouble. Luke came to me 5 years ago. Said he'd lost his job. Said he just needed help for 1 semester. I didn't ask for repayment. I just set up the payments and let it roll. And every year, he said he was about to take over, that things were getting better, and then he'd buy a new car or take the kids to Florida, and somehow it was still me footing the bill. Andrea was silent, her hand hovering over her coffee cup like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. Finally, she said, "He never told anyone?" "Of course not. That would have ruined the image." The table between us felt heavy now, like it was bearing the weight of something sacred and broken. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. Andrea finally looked at me again, this time with something new in her eyes, not pity, not sympathy, but respect. Real, unfiltered, uncomfortable respect. And I knew she was starting to do the math in her head. Not just the money, but the time, the silence, the restraint. There was no way to spin this into something easy to digest. It wasn't charity. It wasn't nobility. It was just the truth, and like most truths in our family, it wasn't welcome. The only question left was how long it would take before the rest of them found out. It came in just before midnight on December 23rd, tucked between a spam text from some subscription I'd forgotten to cancel and a notification about my grocery pickup, which I wasn't even sure I'd need anymore. It was from Luke, his name lighting up my screen like a ghost I didn't summon. Just 2 words. 2 words that carried more weight than any long apology could have. Talk soon. There was no punctuation, no apology, no attempt to explain or soften the edges. Just the flimsiest of lifelines tossed into waters he had made toxic years ago, and I sat there staring at it for what must have been 10 full minutes before I turned the phone face down on the table without responding. I didn't delete it. I didn't block him. I just refused to give it anything more than silence, the same silence I'd given everything else these past few weeks, a silence not born from anger, but from clarity. The next morning, the family group chat exploded to life in the way it always does around holidays, full of virtual bells and tinsel and messages typed in cheerful all caps, the kind of digital joy that feels both forced and suspiciously performative. Mom posted a blurry picture of her living room tree, already half collapsing under the weight of decades of mismatched ornaments. Then someone else sent a meme about eggnog that wasn't funny the first time it was shared back in 2014. Nobody mentioned my absence, though I knew they noticed. My name sat silently in the list of participants, unread, unacknowledged, like a ghost on the guest list. Then Luke posted a photo, a glossy, filtered picture of him and the boys standing outside their house, arms slung casually around each other, teeth bared in carefully staged grins. His wife stood beside them, her smile tight, the edges of her eyes betraying the stress the filter tried to smooth away. The caption read, "Through the storm. Stronger than ever. #grateful #family first." I stared at it for a long moment, not because I cared about the lie, but because I wanted to see how far he'd go to pretend it wasn't crumbling. It was almost impressive how fast people can patch over cracks with hashtags and filters. No one else knew, of course, not the extent of it. Maybe Andrea had told 1 or 2 people, but the family at large still lived inside the narrative Luke built, where he was the solid one, the dependable one, the dad who made sacrifices and smiled through it all. That photo, that caption, it wasn't for the truth. It was for maintenance. Image maintenance. Because in this family, the truth is never as important as keeping up the illusion that everything is fine. I closed the app and stood by the window, the morning light stretching thin across the sidewalk like it wasn't quite sure it belonged there. The street outside was quiet, most of the neighborhood still asleep or pretending to be for the sake of slow breakfasts and overcooked cinnamon rolls. There was no snow this year, just that dull winter gray that coats everything in a film of half-hearted festivity. But something about the stillness felt right, like the world had finally matched the mood I'd been carrying for years. By 10 o'clock, I was dressed and out the door, holding a manila folder and a printed resume that felt both laughably outdated and weirdly optimistic. I drove to the community college about 15 minutes from my place, the one I'd passed by 100 times without stopping, always telling myself I'd look into it someday. Today, apparently, was that day. The front office was quiet, a few tired-looking staff members sipping lukewarm coffee behind scratched plastic shields, and the woman at the reception desk barely looked up when she took my folder. "You looking for full-time or adjunct?" she asked, her voice hoarse in a way that suggested too many years of budget meetings and not enough gratitude. "Part-time," I said. "For now." She nodded, stamped something in red ink I couldn't see, and handed me a paper with dates I'd already memorized from the website. That was it. No grand declarations. No confetti. Just a quiet beginning to something I should have done 10 years ago, back when I was still too entangled in other people's emergencies to even consider my own needs. As I walked back to my car, I felt it, not joy exactly, and not peace, but something firmer, something steadier. Like standing on new ground that hasn't been shaped by someone else's weight. I opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there for a minute, letting the heater warm up and the quiet fill the space. Then, softly, almost as if I were telling it to myself, I whispered, "Merry Christmas, Luke." No bitterness. No irony. Just those 3 words, floating out into the air like a final note in a song I didn't want to sing anymore. And as they left my lips, I felt the strangest thing, a flicker, small and sharp, just under my ribcage. Doubt. Not about what I'd done. Not about the tuition or the silence or the refusal to bail him out one more time. But about whether what I'd done was justice or cruelty wearing better clothes. Because the truth is, people like Luke don't change. They adapt. They recover. They rewrite history in real time, adding chapters that make them the hero, even when you were the one bleeding in the background. He would find a way to twist this too, to frame my silence as abandonment or pettiness or some inevitable result of my loner ways. And maybe the others would believe him. Maybe they wanted to believe him. I don't know. What I do know is this: when someone shows you over and over again that they only value you when you're useful, when they smile with one hand in your pocket and the other pushing you out of frame, eventually, you have to stop participating. You have to stop writing checks to keep the lie alive, even if it means watching it all collapse. So I sat in that car, hands on the wheel, and stared ahead into a road that didn't belong to anyone else. No more payments. No more invisible labor. No more rescuing a brother who wouldn't lift a finger unless it led to applause. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice. It was the ending he never saw coming, the kind with no shouting, no closure, no dramatic last-minute reconciliation. Just a woman, alone on Christmas, finally choosing herself.